Hi everybody, it's Dr. Joanny Liu and welcome to this week's video, this Facebook live stream, which is called Signs Your Teenager Has a Concussion. The first thing I want to say is if you have any questions, please type them. Fantastic. It's like I was hoping that Facebook would do this because this is a much larger screen for me to look at, and I can see at the bottom here that it says comments will appear here. So send me your comments, send me your questions, and I'll try to answer them. To the person who asked me a question last week, asking me about what it means, about what it means if it's at the top of the head or on the side of the head or on the front of the head. I'm going to be answering this and other questions like that next week. So I wanted to just focus on one topic at a time. Okay, so let's get started. Signs that your teenager has a concussion. One of the things that I've noticed in the past couple of years especially is all this emphasis on diagnosis, and all the research is going into diagnosis, doing these benchmark tests, telling people that they got to go to emergency, get an MRI, things like that. And really, we already have a very simple set of rules and guidelines in order to diagnose a concussion. So the thing is, again, is that concussion is about functional differences, functional changes in the person, not actual structural changes in the brain. So an MRI, and definitely not an X-ray, is going to tell you anything. An X-ray only does bone anyway, so unless you suspect a cracked skull, then definitely an X-ray is going to tell you that. And they're really searching and stretching it if they think an MRI is going to tell you anything. So skip the expensive diagnostics. You don't really need to go to emergency for a blow to the head, unless, of course, it was a very catastrophic motor vehicle accident, or something that happened off a motorcycle, or motor crossing, anything that's really, really serious. I don't consider being hit in the head during a soccer match or, even during a football game being that serious. So let's look at this more reasonably. One of the other things about benchmark testing is that they're usually doing things to test the cognitive functions of the brain. So whether you can add 2 plus 1, doing adding, multiplication, division, doing simple stuff like that, and whether you can remember the stuff that you see on the test. Okay, so it's about short-term memory and this sort of thing. I kind of think that stuff really has very limited meaning, because especially with the memory test, when they flash something in front of you, because I've actually taken these tests myself in order to see what's going on, okay? So I know what I'm talking about. So when they're flashing a word in front of you, or they've got a whole bunch of words and they pick something out for you, and you've got to pick the right word that you might have picked earlier in a test, that to me doesn't really mean very much, because even with short-term memory, there's got to be a reason why you would remember anything. And why you remember anything is always because you have a strong emotional attachment to it. So having you do a test like that isn't really telling you very much, and it's not really testing a person for a very high level, because it's so rudimentary, okay? So the thing is that what we really need to look out for, and this is very important, is how well do you know the person that just got hit in the head really hard? If you're the parent and you have a teenager that just got hit really hard I would think that this is your child and you would know how they normally behave, right? How they would look. I was interviewed by Lynette Renda a few weeks ago on her Motivate Me podcast. She's a former high school teacher. And I think a very smart woman too, because she said something to me that I've been suspecting for a long time. And that's why I brought up this whole thing about, well, how well do you know this person? If it's your child, or even a kid that you coach, for however many months, the thing is that's so important is that you know this kid. That's the before picture. And after the blow to the head, that's the after picture. You should know this person really well. So Lynette actually told me that, and I think she was looking after 9th graders, 15-year-olds, and they would walk into the room and they'd be sitting, in the classroom, and she'd be looking around at each child, and she would notice things about them. She would notice that the eyes were glassy, that they'd seem disoriented, that maybe they were a bit unstable when they were walking around. Okay? Like, these are big clues. What was the person like before the hard blow to the head and afterwards? You see, the thing is that a hard blow to the head is not always going to cause a concussion. In fact, most of us go through life getting hit in the head one way or the other. I mean, I get hit in the head sometimes when I forget where the top of the car door is, and I bump into it, and that hurts, I mean, it hurts. That can be a very hard blow to the top of the head. So I want you to understand that concussions don't happen accidentally. In fact, nothing in our life is ever accidental, and that's why I'm going to be talking about the fact that telling a person that they have a concussion is not a diagnosis. A real diagnosis tells you why the concussion happened. Okay? That's why we're going to be talking about that next week, because it's an involved hi Chris, because it's an involved topic that needs to be addressed, because you already know the obvious. If somebody is suddenly acting strangely around you, then you know something has happened to them. That is the bottom line truth. So anything that's out of the ordinary. Usually the headaches don't start until sometime after the blow to the head, just like it did for my son. It took probably a couple of hours before he started getting these awful headaches, and then they lasted for a very long time. I mean, and every single day, and he had several in every single day. So that's abnormal, okay, for somebody who doesn't already have headaches. If they have eye problems, I would definitely consider that. If it's blurred, if they're suffering from double vision, definitely there's something wrong there. If they didn't have it before, right? It's always that before and after picture. If they're the type of person who has a very strong digestive system, like my son does, normally he can eat anything, and he has an appetite. He was a preemie. He was 4 weeks early. He weighed a mere 4 pounds and 15 ounces, so he was under 5 pounds. He was tiny, tiny, tiny. He never missed a meal from the time he was born. So when he lost his appetite, when he didn't feel like eating, I knew that something was definitely wrong, because, again, from the before picture, that was a completely abnormal behavior for him, or trait of his, okay? Because he always eats snacks, 3 square meals, no problem. So the other thing, of course, is the nausea and the vomiting. The nausea and the vomiting is obviously from a balance point of view. There's something wrong. Something's been knocked around in the head. Okay, so like I said, it's functional problems that are showing up elsewhere in the body as well as around the head. They're not structural problems in the brain, so don't worry about that unless it has been, in fact, a catastrophic motor vehicle accident or a really bad fall from 30 feet, 15 feet, 10 feet, and they've come down on their head. That definitely is very serious. But most hard blows to the head will not result in a concussion. But if it does, then you really have to look at the before and the after picture of that person. Okay? So that's why you can spend very little time worrying. Okay? There's no point in worrying. If your child, in fact, does have a concussion, then what you've got to do is you, as the parent, as the adult, have to remain calm, because emotion travels. Okay? We're all in this together. We're all very connected together. So for your teenager who may not understand what's going on because they're so disoriented because of the blow to the head, it's up to you to guide them as well as you can. Okay? So definitely, very definitely, compassion, being calm on your own part is the best thing that you can do for your child. You have to remain calm, because if you start panicking, you're not going to be any use to your kid who needs your help right now. So there's the parent's role in knowing what your kid was like before the concussion. Hi, Barb. And the parent's role afterwards, observing what your child is going through and what changes in their behavior. Okay? What changes that have been made, because that is the surest sign of whether things are okay or not. And it doesn't require special testing. I guarantee you this. My son, who was 28 years old at the time, he broke every single rule that was out there, and there aren't that many. He went back on the soccer field after his eyesight came back. Thank God it came back. And then when he drove himself home, that's when the headache started, and he knew he had a concussion. He took out all his extracurricular activities, but the one thing that he kept doing was he kept doing a very highly demanding intellectual job as at that time, an intermediate process engineer. So he didn't stay in a dark room for days at a time. He didn't stop doing all the computer stuff. He just kept working. I mean, things did get worse for sure, but he knew inside himself that things weren't right. Okay, so those are the questions that you have to ask, plus the observations that you make. Because the interesting thing is that at work, he did ask his colleagues, do you see any difference in me? And they all told him no. So he wasn't showing any outward signs in that case, but he knew for himself that there was something very wrong. Although, if you're a very observant person and you know somebody really well, you can pick up the signs. I mean, this is a guy who usually goes out eating and drinking with his pals at lunch hour. All of a sudden, he wasn't doing that with somebody, they weren't observant enough. So it's, hi Barb. Hi Laura. So it's really, really important that you know the person, and I know you do. So don't be afraid of your own judgment, because you are the best judgment for your kid, not the doctor who hardly ever sees them. Okay? The doctor who hardly ever sees them, maybe sees them once a year, maybe once every twice a year, is not a good judge. of your teenager, but you are. So trust yourself. I want you to know that you can trust yourself as a parent, as a coach, as a teacher. You're the one who is around that kid. Well, and even actually Lynette Renda was saying that as a teacher, she's around those kids more than the parents are, right? Yeah, she was right. She sees those kids as a teacher for more hours of a day than a parent does. So, very bright woman that she is, she's definitely right. So again, as adults, trust yourself. Any picture of your kid that you have of him, knowing what he or she is like before the concussion and comparing it to afterwards, that is your best indication of whether there is a concussion or not. And I did talk about what those things are earlier on this live stream. So you can watch the replay. So again, next week I'm going to be talking about why telling somebody you've got a concussion isn't a diagnosis at all. But I will tell you how to know what is the cause of that concussion, why you have it, why it's happened to you at this time in your life, why it didn't happen before, because those are all factors that are very important. So, thank you very much for listening in, for watching, and I'll be back next week. Same time, same bat channel. Okay? Awesome. Bye.